Riot has just announced a massive amount of changes which will be happening in Season 14. These include changes to the map, heralds, dragons, barons, yes I did say barons, as well as many other changes to items and even more aspects of the game. Starting with map changes, let's have a look at the new top lane, which makes top laners far safer and makes the map a good amount more symmetrical. One of the biggest changes here is that the entrance from the river into the lane is massively larger, and this comes with the side brush being removed and replaced with a smaller pixel brush. This will make it far more difficult to junglers to come up and influence the top lane, as they're going to be seen from a mile away, especially if top laners can get a ward into the pixel brush. In addition, both tri-brushes now take you behind a tower, which removes one gank path of going through the tri-brush behind the enemy top laner. Only having one obvious way to gank a lane is going to make the top lane far more 1v1 centric. Next, looking at mid lane, we have a number of changes, where you now only have two ways to gank, as the third way you used to gank now takes you to the enemy tower. In addition to these changes, the river brush is now set back a good amount further, which will give mid laners far more warning when a jungler is trying to gank them. In addition, this makes warding from the mid lane far easier, as a ward here should protect you from most gank paths. Next, looking at the dragon pit, we also have a number of changes, with the most obvious one being a new long wall opposite the pit. This means if the red team wants to fight, they now have to commit far harder than they used to, not being easily able to retreat back into their jungle. Also, brushes have been placed on both sides of this wall, and the top pixel brush has been removed, with the bot side of the dragon pit now having the pixel brush. And finally, we have the bot side, where the biggest change is both red and blue side will have a tri-brush, which an enemy jungler can walk through to gank. However, the river brush along this wall is gone and instead has been replaced with a pixel brush, which similar to top lane will make it far more difficult for an enemy jungler to simply walk into your lane. These changes make the lane far more symmetrical and doesn't innately make one side safer. In addition, we also have some massive changes to the jungle. Instead of the first Rift Herald, a camp of 3 Void Grubs will now spawn. For each grub killed, your whole team gets a buff which deals damage over time to turrets. And after the first 3 have been killed, 3 more will spawn a few minutes later. And if your team can also kill all 6 of these, they will spawn small versions of these when sieging. Rift Herald will now instead spawn at 14 minutes. And after you defeat it and summon it with the buff, any friendly champion can then click on it to control the monster. They'll be able to steer it with it dealing damage to enemies it passes through, and it will launch you out if it hits terrain or a tower. And one of the biggest changes is that Baron now has 3 different forms. Each of these 3 different forms will change the way he fights, in addition to the way the map looks, where one of the Barons will make the map look like this, one of them will make it look like this, and one of them will keep it the way we're used to. In addition, when Baron spawns, it changes monsters on the map into Void monsters where they become far tankier. When killing Void Scuttlecrab, you're now granted a massive burst of vision, and red and blue buff will now grant the buff to every alive member on your team. All different Dragon Rifts have now been changed a bit too to line up with the new map, with Infernal Rift being fully changed, and there will be a ton of item changes with them getting rid of mythic items. There's far too much to go over in a 3-minute video, but look at a link in my description where it goes over it in more detail. However, there's going to be a large focus on changing up mage items, and there will only be one support item to buy, and when the support item is fully stacked, you will then get to choose which item you want.